Chosen one, you have been carrying something you did not ask to carry, a knowing that arrived not with ceremony but with weight. That settled into you slowly, through seasons you would never have chosen, through the exact losses that took everything except the thing you were always meant to keep. And now, it is here, patient, steady, undeniable in a way that your circumstances have not yet caught up with. They can feel it. The ones who were counting on you staying in the role they cast you in. They can feel the shift in how you hold yourself in rooms that used to have authority over you. In the silence you no longer fill with explanation. In the decisions you have stopped running by people who were never genuinely for you. That feeling in them has a name. It is not confusion. It is not concern. It is fear. And I want you to understand this with the kind of precision that changes things permanently. They are not afraid you might fail. They are afraid you have already figured out that you cannot. Something brought you to this message today that did not ask your permission. It simply redirected the whole morning to make this encounter happen. Because what you are about to receive is not a comfort. It is a confirmation. And confirmation this specific does not arrive for people who have not been through exactly what you have been through. You paid for this knowing, chosen one, with years, with silence, with the willingness to keep moving when every external signal said stop. Now let me tell you what you actually know. Everything I am about to share with you in this message is completely free, every word of it. But if at any point something in your spirit tells you there is more waiting for you, something that works at the exact level we are going to discuss today, you will find it in the description below and in the pinned comment. Only when you feel led, not before. Now I need you to stay with me through everything that follows, because by the time we reach the end of this message, you will have language for something you have been carrying without words for a very long time. You will understand why certain people went quiet the moment you started to grow. You will understand what the wilderness was actually building inside you while it looked like nothing was happening. You will understand why the restlessness that refused to let you settle was never a flaw. And you will understand, finally and completely, why the fear in their eyes was never your warning. It was always your credential. Do not leave before we get there. Before we go any further, there is one thing I need you to do. If you are around other people right now, this message was not designed for that environment. What is coming requires the version of you that is not performing, not explaining, not managing how you are being received. This is for the real version of you, the one that lives in the quiet. So if you can, settle in wherever you are. Take one deliberate breath and let yourself receive this fully. There is a moment that most chosen ones can point to. Not a specific date, not a dramatic event with a clean before and after, just a shift. A moment when you were in the middle of an ordinary conversation, or sitting in a room you had sat in 100 times, or living the life that was supposed to feel like enough, and something inside you went completely still. And in that stillness, something said, this is not all of it. Not with anger, not with bitterness toward anything outside you, just a quiet, unshakable, completely personal knowing. This environment cannot hold everything that I am. There is more to this. And from that moment, things began to change. Not all at once, but one by one. Slowly, like a radio, gradually tuning toward a clearer channel. The first shift was in your tolerance. The environments and conversations and dynamics that used to feel completely normal started to feel wrong in a way that was hard to explain. Not difficult in the way that hard things are difficult. Something more specific, more like misalignment, like trying to wear something that fit perfectly for years and then one morning it simply does not fit anymore and you do not know when it changed. Familiar spaces started to feel foreign. Easy relationships started to feel draining. Patterns you had accepted without question became suddenly impossible to unsee. And you probably wondered if something was wrong with you, if you had become too difficult, too sensitive, too particular about things that used to not bother you. But here is what that shift actually was. That was not you becoming difficult. That was you becoming discerning. The signal inside you was strengthening, and your tolerance for static was going down at the same rate. Those are not the same thing. One is a problem, the other is calibration. The second shift was a restlessness that would not go quiet. Not anxiety, not the ordinary kind of dissatisfaction that comes and goes with circumstances. Something more persistent. A pull towards something you could not fully name or describe. Like you were meant to build something or step into something, and the exact shape of it was not visible yet, but the weight of it was absolutely real. That is not aimlessness, chosen one. That is the pressure of a frequency that has simply outgrown the container it was placed in. The third shift was in your intuition, and this one is subtle, but it matters. Your knowing started arriving differently, not as vague impressions that could be argued away by logic, as sentences, complete, fully formed before the reasoning part of your mind had time to catch up with them. You knew something was off before the evidence arrived. You knew someone was not who they were presenting themselves to be long before anything confirmed it. You knew a direction was right or wrong, not because you had analyzed it, but because something deeper in you had already read the whole situation. That is not imagination. That is your signal getting stronger. The fourth shift was in timing, the right word arriving through an unexpected source at exactly the moment you needed it. The right person appearing in the most unlikely circumstances. The conversation you needed to have finding you before you had decided to go looking for it. You noticed this. Something in you registered it even when the logical part of your mind was working hard to call it coincidence. It is not coincidence. And the fifth shift, this one the most confronting of all. You became sensitive to the energy of the people around you in a way that you could not turn off. You could feel when a presence was drawing from you before a single word had been spoken. You could feel when someone was wearing a version of themselves that did not match what was underneath. You could feel when a room was performing. That precision is not a burden, it is tuning. A high-frequency signal does not absorb everything it encounters, it detects. So let me name what all of this actually is, because there is something they do not want you to understand about these shifts. They do not want you to know that your sensitivity is not weakness, but the most accurate instrument you have ever been given. They do not want you to know that your inability to stay small is not a character flaw, but a design feature, something that was placed in you on purpose. They do not want you to know that the silence others have used against you is not evidence of your failure, but a direct response to what they sense in you and cannot match. They do not want you to know that what they called too much was not too much at all. It was exactly enough, calibrated for a room they were never prepared to walk into. Every shift in tolerance, every flash of intuition that arrived as a complete sentence, every moment the timing aligned in a way that could not be explained, every time you felt a room change, the moment you entered it. You are not broken, chosen one. You are broadcasting. And there are people who cannot handle the clarity of what you are transmitting. But here is what no one has ever properly explained to you about this pattern. It was not random. It was not unique to your particular circumstances. And it was not an accident. The deeper question this message was sent to answer is not what the signs are. The deeper question is why they exist. And the answer begins with something written in Hebrew 3,000 years ago about a man whose brothers could not look at him without fear, about the moment his frequency grew past every cage they built for him. And who they really are is not who you think. When I say they are terrified of you, I need you to hear something important before anything else. I am not talking about individual villains. I am not asking you to look at the people around you with suspicion or bitterness. That kind of framing would actually slow you down, and you have been slowed down long enough. What I am talking about is a system, something far older than any of the individuals operating inside it. Think about what happens to most children. They arrive into the world with something running at full capacity, a mental sharpness that absorbs information almost instantly. a creativity that flows before it has to justify itself, an intuition that moves faster than language, a sense of knowing so precise that it sometimes frightens the adults around them. And then something begins, gradually, without ceremony, without a single announcement. Scientists have documented it, and they have a name for it. They call it the decline effect. Between the ages of 7 and the early adult years, something shuts down. The sharpness dulls. The creativity becomes self-conscious and slow. The intuition gets labeled irrational and pushed away. The knowing gets called arrogance and told to wait outside. And here is what I need you to understand. The decline effect is not just a neutral side effect of growing up. It is the mechanism by which a system that depends on your reduced capacity continues to function. A system that runs more smoothly when the people inside it believe that their sensitivity is a liability, that their frequency is too much, that their knowing is just their imagination. Now let me tell you about Joseph. In the ancient Hebrew text, there is a specific word used about Joseph at a moment that most people completely miss. The word is gadal. In Hebrew, gadal means to become great, not in the way that empires are great, not famous or recognized or celebrated, but to grow beyond the ordinary measure of what was expected, to expand past the container. And here is what is important about when the text uses this word. It does not appear after the resistance stopped. It does not appear after Joseph was finally recognized and promoted and given a position that matched what he carried. It appears in the middle of everything his brothers and Potiphar and circumstance were doing to suppress him. He gadal while they were still trying. He grew beyond measure in the middle of the suppression, not after it ended. His brothers did not throw him in the pit because he was arrogant. They did it because they could feel something in him that they did not have, something they could not control, could not manage, could not quiet. And that feeling, that recognition of a frequency in another person that you cannot access in yourself, has exactly one name: fear. Saul had the same response to David. Long before David commanded any army, long before he took any throne, Saul became afraid of him. The text is specific. It was not fear of David's skill, or his alliances, or his strategy. It was a recognition that something lived in David that had stopped living in Saul. And Saul, who had been the most powerful man in every room for years, suddenly understood something for the first time. His authority was based on position. David's was based on frequency, and those are not the same thing. One can be taken, the other cannot. So when the people in your life have grown quieter, as you have grown clearer, understand what is actually happening beneath the surface of it. They are not reacting to something you did wrong. They are reacting to a recognition they cannot fully explain in words. Something in you has been growing, and they can feel the gap between where they are and where you are going. Now, I want to show you the 3 things the system requires in order to stay intact. Because once you understand these 3 things, you will understand exactly what it means that you have figured them out. The first thing the system requires is your confusion about your own nature. As long as you believe that the knowing inside you is wishful thinking, that the sensitivity is anxiety, that the frequency is imagination, you will keep looking outside yourself for confirmation that will never fully arrive, and your dependence on external validation keeps the machine running. The second thing it requires is your belief that sensitivity is a liability. If you believe that feeling everything this deeply makes you a problem rather than a gift, you will spend enormous energy trying to suppress the most powerful thing you have. And the third thing it requires is your willingness to perform, smallness, to keep rooms comfortable. If you accept that your responsibility is to make people comfortable with your presence by making yourself smaller, you will keep shrinking in ways that feel like consideration but are actually self-erasure. Once you figure out all 3, the system loses its mechanism for holding you in place. The grip simply stops working. You have been figuring this out, chosen one. One layer at a time, one season at a time. And that is what they have been feeling. Before I take you into the revelation that changes the entire shape of this story, I want to name something for those of you who feel in your spirit that there is a practical dimension waiting here. Not just understanding, not just the right words for what you have been carrying, but something that works at the level of the frequency itself, at the exact biological and spiritual level we have been discussing today. There is something called the Genius Song. It is an audio track built specifically around the science of gamma frequency reactivation, the direct counterpoint to the decline effect. What it does, in the simplest terms possible, is create the conditions for your brain to return to the frequency it was born with, the one the system spent years suppressing. 7 minutes. Headphones. No meditation required. No special preparation or early morning ritual. I am going to come back to it in the second part of this message, with everything you need to receive it with the full context it deserves. But for those of you whose spirit has already moved toward it before we get there, it is in the description below and in the pinned comment. Only when you feel led. What comes next is the part that answers the question this entire message was always building toward. Stay with me. We left at the edge of the most important revelation in this message, and I am not going to waste a single second getting there. I told you what the system requires to keep you operating below your actual capacity. I showed you Joseph Gadal in the middle of the suppression. I showed you Saul terrified of a frequency he could not match. And I told you that you have been figuring out all three mechanisms, one layer at a time. Now, I want to tell you what you actually figured out, because it is more specific than you might think. What you figured out is not a secret doctrine. It is not a hidden teaching that belongs only to spiritual language. It is something that science and scripture have been pointing toward from completely opposite directions for decades, and what you figured out, the thing they have been terrified of you discovering, is the truth of your own frequency. You are not a standard transmitter operating at a standard capacity. You were calibrated at birth with a signal strength that the people around you were simply not carrying at the same level, and the decline effect does not land the same way on everyone. Chosen ones, the ones who carry this specific frequency, feel the gap more acutely than anyone else, because the distance between who they were born as and who the system reshaped them into is simply larger. The restlessness that refused to let you settle into ordinary, the inability to stay in rooms that could not hold you, the sense of being built for something your current environment cannot accommodate. That is not ego. That is not delusion. That is the gap between your frequency and the static you have been living inside of. And the terrified response from the people in your life was never about your behavior. It was never about what you did or did not do right. It was always about your frequency. The same way Joseph's brothers were not reacting to his actions when they threw him in the pit. They were reacting to what they sensed he was carrying and could not suppress. You are the seer, the one who sees what rooms are not ready to acknowledge. You are the cycle breaker, the one who ends in your generation what has been cycling and repeating for generations before you. You are the light bearer. And the terrified response is not proof that you are wrong. It is proof that your light is real enough to cast a shadow on the comfortable dark. You are allowed to know this. I want you to hear that as genuine permission, not just as information. You are allowed to know your own frequency without apologizing for it. You are allowed to step into visibility without rehearsing your smallness first. You are allowed to stop translating yourself into a version that fits inside rooms that were never designed to hold you. You are allowed to outgrow the people who needed you to stay confused, because your confusion was part of how they stayed comfortable. You are allowed to protect what is being built in you, even when protecting it looks like withdrawal to the people who wanted your unlimited access. And you do not owe anyone an explanation for becoming who you were always intended to be. What they called instability in you was your frequency recalibrating. What they named arrogance was your signal strengthening past the level they could manage. What they called your excessive need for alone time was preparation sealing itself into you, getting everything in place for the clarity you now carry. What they labeled as being too sensitive was tuning becoming so precise that misalignment simply could not stay invisible to you anymore. Not weaknesses, not problems to fix, transformation. And I hear the voice of the Father saying something over you today. I did not suppress what I placed in you. I protected it. I kept it safe inside the seasons that looked like silence, inside the years that had the appearance of delay and abandonment, until you were strong enough to carry it, without setting it down, the first time someone questioned whether you deserved it. You were worth protecting, chosen one, even in the seasons when you did not feel like it. Now, before I show you something that was built for exactly this moment in your journey, I need to name one more piece, because this is the piece that makes everything we have discussed today something you can actually act on rather than just understand. The decline effect is not permanent. That is what the system absolutely does not want you to know. The suppression of your frequency, the quieting of what you could feel and sense and access, is not a one-way door. The research is clear on this. Reactivation is possible, and not in the distant, complicated, years of daily effort way you might expect. The science behind gamma frequency, the specific brainwave that carries exactly the kind of clarity and intuition and creative intelligence and spiritual sensitivity we have been describing, shows consistent evidence of reactivation through something called brain entrainment, the ability of specific targeted sound frequencies to pull brainwave activity back into alignment. In a research laboratory in Cambridge, scientists mapped the neural signatures of gamma activity in subjects before and after exposure to targeted audio frequencies. The results showed consistent reactivation of gamma states in people who had tested far below their childhood baselines. What had gone quiet in them was not gone. It had simply been waiting for the right conditions to come back. What this means in plain language is that the frequency you were born with, the one the decline effect suppressed, is still there. It did not leave, it went quiet, and it can come back online. Dr. Robert Lake spent 34 years focused on exactly this question. His research, drawing on findings from MIT, Princeton, and several other leading research institutions, led him to build a tool specifically around this mechanism. Not a therapy that requires weekly appointments, not a course that demands an hour of your day, not something that only reaches you if you have the right conditions in your life. A 7-minute audio track called The Genius Song. You put on headphones, you close your eyes, you listen. The technology inside the audio does not ask you to will your frequency into alignment. It creates the conditions for your brain to return to what it already knows, and it begins working from the very first session. I want to tell you about someone before I give you the details. A woman, 38 years old, who had walked through every spiritual practice you can name. Meditation retreats in places that cost her real money. Yoga, energy, work, every modality that promised connection and clarity. She described herself as someone who had been searching for a real sense of spiritual resonance for years and who always arrived at almost feeling it, almost hearing it, almost. She started using the Genius Song, not because she had strong faith in it, but because she had run out of other options. 2 weeks later, she used a single word to describe what had changed. Synchronicities. She said it was as if the universe had started speaking in a language she could suddenly understand. The right moment, the right door, the right conversation finding her before she went looking. That is not magic. That is a gamma frequency operating the way it was designed to operate. Now I want to speak honestly about one thing, because the people who have been through what you have been through deserve honesty more than anything else. This is not something that rearranges your circumstances overnight. What it does is begin the process of bringing the signal back online. Some people notice the shift within days, and some people are more like another person. Dr. Lake describes who came back after 34 days of using it with no dramatic moment, no single turning point. Just a morning when she realized the stuck feeling was completely gone, that the decisions she had been unable to make for months were now clear, and that something had changed so quietly she had not noticed it happening. The Genius song has been used by more than 18,300 people, and less than 4% have asked for their money back. I share that not to impress you, but to tell you something true. The vast majority of people who use this found what they came looking for. Here is what it costs you to find out if you are one of them. Think about the options people typically consider when they want to reclaim what the decline effect took from them. A meditation app will run you around $15 a month, and none of them are targeting your gamma frequency specifically. A single session with a licensed therapist costs around $150, and while that has genuine value, it does not reach the frequency level we have been discussing. A weekend spiritual retreat runs you $400 to $800, and a clinical biofeedback session, which does work at the frequency level directly, costs close to $300 per visit, and typically requires weeks of repeated appointments before any lasting shift takes hold. Dr. Robert Lake compressed 34 years of that research into a 7-minute audio file. He originally priced it at $49, and that was already an extraordinary compression of what the technology actually represents. But for the people coming to this message, people he believes are arriving, having already done the inner work of figuring something out, the price is $39, one time, no subscription, no recurring charge, delivered directly to your email the moment you access it. And with it, 4 additional tools included at no extra charge. A second audio track calibrated specifically for the brains of children, so that what you are reclaiming now, the generation growing up around you, does not have to lose in the first place. A classic book that is the actual foundation the film The Secret drew from, practical principles about financial reality and not vague positive thinking, valued at $20 on its own. A 22-minute guided visualization that walks you through 4 specific areas of your life, valued at $29. And a 5-habit reference guide for maintaining your gamma once it has been reactivated, valued at $12. The total value of those 4 bonuses alone is $80. Free when you access the Genius song at $39. And if you listen and nothing shifts, Dr. Lake will return every dollar within 90 days. No conditions, no questions, no requirement to return anything. And you keep all 4 bonuses regardless. That is not a sales arrangement. That is a belief in what this does that is strong enough to put real money behind it. One thing I need to protect you from before you go looking. There are imitation products circulating online that use the name and the language of the Genius song but do not contain the actual brain entrainment technology. They are standard audio files with no mechanism for gamma reactivation. The only place to receive the real product, with the complete technology, all 4 bonuses, and the money-back guarantee, is through the link in the description below and the pinned comment. Not on Amazon, not anywhere you find through a search engine. Only through this specific link. What you find elsewhere is not what we have been discussing today. The link is waiting below, and the pinned comment has it too. Only when your spirit confirms it, not before. Now let me give you the revelation that recontextualizes everything. The terrified response was never the threat. It was always the proof. Every person who withdrew when you began to clarify yourself. Every room that grew uncomfortable the moment you stopped performing smallness. Every relationship that ended when you stopped needing it to define you. Those were not warning signs that something in you was wrong. They were confirmation signals, frequency recognition. The more authentic your transmission became, the more uncomfortable the static around you became. That is not a failure of your character. That is physics. You cannot carry a signal this clear and this strong and expect the static around it to remain undisturbed. The interference is the evidence. The discomfort of others is the proof that you are broadcasting at a level that can actually be felt. You did not figure out that you are better than the people who are afraid of you. You figured out something simpler and far more important than that. You figured out that you are not too much for the world. You are too much for the static. And that is a completely different story with a completely different ending. What looked like wandering in you was a frequency searching for an environment it could actually operate in without interference. What felt like loss was your signal releasing the weight of everything that was creating interference. What seemed like confusion was clarity that had not yet found its exact vocabulary. You were not lost, you were in transit, moving steadily from what was suppressing you toward what could actually hold you. And the credential you carry, chosen one, it was never academic, it was never social, it was never something another person decided to give you or withhold from you. It was built in the years that looked like nothing was happening, in the seasons of silence that other people misread as stagnation. In every morning you got up and kept moving without anyone watching, and without anyone acknowledging what it was costing you. You are the seer, you are the cycle breaker, you are the light bearer, and both responses are confirmation. The ones who draw close to your light and the ones who choose distance from it. Both of them are telling you the exact same thing. The signal is real, and it has always been real. I want to pause here for a moment, not to add another layer or build towards something new, just to let what you have received today settle into the place in you that already knew it before the words arrived. You came into this message carrying something without a name for it. And now you have the name, the restlessness, the tolerance shifts, the intuition arriving as complete sentences, the timing that could not be explained, the frequency in you that the system spent years trying to quiet. It was never broken. It was never wrong. It was never too much. It was always exactly what it was supposed to be, carrying exactly what it was always meant to carry. The wilderness was not wasted. Everything the stripping away removed made room for what could not arrive until you were carrying less of what was not yours to carry. The false version of you that the system built had to fall away so the frequency underneath could come back online. That is what happened in those seasons. Not punishment, preparation. Now, I want to guide you through something. You do not need to move. You do not need to go anywhere or do anything with your hands. Simply breathe once, deliberately, wherever you are right now, and follow me. Picture yourself standing at a threshold, not a physical doorway, but a point in your own awareness. On one side of that threshold, everything you have been carrying without a name for it, the weight of knowing without the vocabulary, the frequency without the full permission to let it broadcast. On the other side, everything you are walking into, now that you have received what today brought you, the version of yourself that carries this knowing fully and openly and without apology. The threshold between those two places is not locked. It never was. The only thing that was missing was knowing what you were carrying. Now you know. Take one more breath and step through. I hear the Spirit saying this over you in this moment. What I placed in you was never meant to fit quietly into the spaces that were too small for it. It was never designed to be managed or shrunk or apologized for. It was placed in you to overflow, past the edges of what others expected from you, past the walls of their comfort, into everything it was always designed to reach. Let it overflow, chosen one. You stayed through everything this message asked you to sit with. You went deeper when it was easier to scroll away. You stayed when the mirror was uncomfortable, and I want to release you now from the weight you no longer need to carry out of this. You are released from the need to explain your frequency to people who have not traveled to where you are. Released from performing smallness as a kindness to rooms that mistook your restraint for your ceiling. Released from the long sentence that said your knowing was arrogance, your sensitivity was a problem, and your growth was something to minimize so others could stay comfortable around you. What was placed in you was placed there to be carried, fully, openly, without asking permission. You are the seer, you are the cycle breaker, you are the light bearer, And the terrified response was never your warning. It was your credential. Go into what remains of this season carrying what you now know, not as something to prove and not as something to perform, as fact. The signal is broadcasting. It has been broadcasting for longer than you were given credit for. And now that you know what it is, there is no mechanism left that can convince you it was ever static. You figured it out, chosen one. And they were right to be terrified. If this message confirmed something you have been carrying quietly, leave one word in the comments right now. Signal. Just that one word. That is your declaration that you know what you carry, and you are no longer making it smaller to fit other people's comfort. If something here gave you language for what you have been living, let me know by pressing like. It tells me this frequency is landing where it belongs. And if you want to keep receiving messages built for exactly the kind of person you are, the button to stay connected is right below. This channel was not built for everyone. It was built for the ones who have been willing to figure it out. And if you know someone who has been walking through a long season of silence, someone who has been called too much by every room that was not big enough to hold them, someone who is carrying something they cannot name and who needs someone to name it for them, share this message with them, not as a suggestion, as a key. You were guided here today, and you are leaving changed. I will see you in the next message, chosen one.